Oh, right. Nope, I saw him. There he is. Can you see it? Can you pull it back a little bit? I bet that would help someone too. That would be lovely. Tom, do you want to get started? You're muted.
I'm fine to get started, but I think technically somebody that's there in person is going to have to start us.
Oh, I thought because it was a committee meeting that we didn't have to do that.
No, I think everybody.
Fine with me. Okay, so let's open this meeting of the all committees. March 28th, Monday. Roll call shows that all of council is present. Tom Perry is participating remotely.
Barely.
Barely. And item number 2 is Comprehensive Plan Implementation Committee. So I'll turn it over to that committee chair, which is me. And item A is the proposed revision to the land use ordinance to define fraternities and sorority use. And I think we're turning it over to our esteemed town planner.
Hi everyone, Kyle Drexler, town planner. Nice to see the new councilors for the first time, I think. So in our ordinance, typically in our land use ordinance, when we have a specific land use or activity, it's identified in our table of land uses, and that says where something is zoned for and what the level of permitting is. And then accompanied by that should be a definition that actually defines and describes what that use is. In some cases, though, I guess over time, things just kind of got implemented in odd ways. So in this case, we have a use for fraternities and sorority houses, that allows that land use in the university zoning district. But we don't have a definition to accompany that. So when that happens, we usually turn to just a standard dictionary definition. So this proposed amendment is meant to define fraternity and sorority houses as what we typically expect from them, some lodging facility being used by the fraternity or sorority as part of the university. But I think through conversations that staff had with different fraternities and sororities in the past, there was this sort of other activity, that there was a desire to take place where when the university might not be in session, using that space for university events where groups of people taking part in the same sort of activity could use those spaces, in the meantime, while the fraternities and sororities weren't there. So this definition is also meant to capture that activity, whereas if you kind of just left it vague and undefined, you would run into an issue of, when the fraternities and sororities aren't there and the space is being used by other parties, is it a rooming house? Is it some other type of lodging facility that's not typically, identified as a specific fraternity or sorority? So it's a pretty simple amendment that's really just meant to add some clarification and make things easier within the ordinance. It's not really putting any additional regulations or anything like that on fraternities or sorority houses. It's not changing the zoning or standards or anything like that. So this is here for review, and if council was okay with the language, the next step would be referring it to the planning board for a public hearing.
Folks have questions for Kyle? Yeah.
I do. What is the significance of it's got something in here about a lease, requiring a lease and requiring the group serve a common interest. What is the significance? Why are we concerned?
So the common interest would be so the fraternity or sorority house couldn't just be rented out to a bunch of individuals. The idea is that it's a specific group of people that the university is bringing to the area to take part in some sort of university event or function. It's not meant to just be additional lodging or housing for individuals. That's not typically what a fraternity or sorority house is used for.
Yeah, so I'm gonna step in just a little bit because we've had this conversation. What is important for us to be able to keep this within the same scope and not kick this up into a hotel or other use per NFPA or restrict the numbers that can be in this is to make sure that it is a group that comes together for a common interest. Because if you look at a fraternity definition, they are a group that comes together for a common interest. We had conversations with the fire marshal's office when we were putting this all together. The fire marshal's office currently, and I say currently because with any state office, they can be whimsical and capricious, has said that they would define what we are doing as a dormitory, which allows for greater capacity. So it's not just the number of people that are there, it's the number of rooms that can be made into bedrooms and the amount of space that's there. That as soon as you allow individual use, it now is more of a transient individual, which either would hit the NFPA rooming house definition or hotel. And
So for the fraternity houses, the way they're all laid out, they would all hit hotel motel, which is 17 or more occupants inside the building. And so basically without that language like you were talking about, you would basically you would be allowing the fraternities to open their own hotels during the summertime in those districts without that comment. And by fire code, on the definition of fire code, hotel motel, hotel dormitory is the standard. And the definitions talk about fraternities specifically under. So they do have to meet that standard for fire code anyway. But that's a little bit different than what the zoning code and zoning ordinance is.
So this was actually part of my major question about the language, which is that under the NFPA, it talked about if housing members and non-members. So does this language solve that problem? Because the groups are non-members, but they are members of a different organization and it's okay for them to coexist?
what the fire marshal's office told us when we reached out to them was as long as they were still groups affiliated with the university. So these are leases with the university. They're not leases with individual people.
Right.
They would still code it as if it were a fraternity sorority.
So I think last summer, there was a group that came in for the summer before, I don't remember which.
It was before the pandemic, outward bound.
They came in for the outward bound program because it was affiliated with the university. It was an acceptable practice.
Well, it was acceptable because we chose not to enforce the ordinance because we were working on
Right,
this.
yes,
Right.
yes, that's right.
But as soon as we're aware that there's a problem, we're obligated to either change the ordinance, which the prior council that was here prior to the pandemic, when we started this conversation, was supportive of, or we have to enforce the ordinance as it's written. We are in a great place right now where nobody wants to say, you can't do that, because we know they've been doing it. The previous council tacitly agreed, so we as staff said, we're gonna work through this process, we don't wanna upend what you're doing. We've told the university that they have issued the leases based on that. Based on your conversations today, if you don't wanna revise the ordinance, then we would be in a position where we need to go back to the university and say, the council isn't interested in revising the ordinance, and from this point forward, they can't lease or rent to non-members.
And if we're aware that the practice is happening and we are choosing to not address it, I assume we have legal liability if something were to happen on that property?
So, yes, and when all of us raise our hand and say that we're gonna uphold the ordinance, that's kind of what this is about. And there's some leeway, right, when we know there's a problem and we're working on it, but not, we know there's a problem, we've talked about it, we don't want to do anything, and oh, by the way, don't enforce it. That would be not good.
What
Oh, go ahead.
type of liability would you, this obviously meets all the codes. It meets the codes that allows for more than 17, just like a dorm, right? So that's all taken care of. The code wise, it's all set. And so
If
we
there
would
are
be-
non-members, though, it triggers the rooming house clause of this NFPA, which would mean 16 or less people. correct?
So don't confuse, this is where we tend to run
Right,
into
there's two
trouble.
different,
Yeah, don't
things
confuse
going
what I enforce through, NFPA is the National Fire Protection Association. Don't confuse that with town ordinance. Whether you call it box that people live in, or no matter what you call it, depending on how many potential sleeping spaces are there, I'm going to enforce the code that applies under NFPA. What you have to focus on is what the language is in your community, in this community, what the language is in this community, and streamlining processes as much as you can, so it's not confusing for Mitch or his group when they go and do code enforcement actions or stuff like that. I think one of the biggest things we're trying to do is clean up language, although this doesn't feel like it's cleaning it up. We're trying to clean it up so that we're more in line where we can be with code enforcement, because there is, regardless if it's fire code or municipal code, there's still a code enforcement piece that has to happen.
But beyond municipal liability, you hire a town manager, right? In my job description, it says, I am charged with enforcing the ordinances. I don't get to pick and choose which ones I enforce. If you leave the language as it is, I have to enforce that the only people that can be in the fraternities are fraternity members. So if you want to leave it that way and stop longstanding practice and make people try to jump through hoops to show a grandfathered use, which they haven't been able to do, then we can go that direction. This is not me telling you what to do. The other place you can go is if you go with something similar to the ordinance language that we've provided, it will allow for current practice, and also that lease part is also part of the university's requirements as well, because their lease is with the university. And, or you can open it up wide open and do whatever you want, and then Jeff will have to come along and figure out what codes apply. So there are different, you have all the control here, but the idea of in the brain saying we are changing something right now, the change happened before I ever arrived. I just didn't know about it until right before the pandemic. And now that I know about it in good faith, and the town knows about it in good faith.
we are talking about it on camera.
Yeah.
So if I may, I'm in favor of the ordinance language that was presented. I think it recognizes a longstanding practice. I can personally verify that this has gone on for over 50 years. And it makes no sense for me not to validate what's been going on for that length of time and approve this modified language.
Do other folks we haven't heard from have questions or comments? Yeah.
Well, I would say there's probably value to having these buildings occupied and looked over in the off season, as well as maintaining the current practice. And also, nothing in this ordinance forces a fraternity or sorority to accept sublessees if they choose not to. So it doesn't affect, it doesn't mandate that they do anything that they're haven't been doing anyway. But I think it's better to have buildings occupied than standing vacant.
Reminds me of our short-term rental discussion, like people are doing it, let's make it legal.
And I do fully support keeping the same practice. It feels like we're overregulating. That's my perspective.
So if we don't add the language in, we can't do the current practice because it's not a fraternity or sorority. Those groups wouldn't fall under the existing fraternity sorority use in our land use ordinance. So without adding that provision in there for allowing the groups of, people related to some university event outside of the fraternity sorority house. If you just had if you had those groups using the structures, you no longer be meeting the normal ordinary definition of a fraternity or sorority house, which would be occupied by those specific fraternity or sorority members. So we would have to look at it from our zoning standpoint as, are they trying to be a rooming house? Are they trying to be a single family home? Are they like, what type of residential dwelling are they using here?
And the other point I would make is this language was arrived at through meetings with fraternity people, meetings with the Greek life rep on campus, all sitting down at this gigantic table with our life safety inspector and Dave Myron back in the day. So it's not like I just pulled this out of my hat and said, let's throw this down. This was.
Ironically, if we didn't revise the ordinance language, we would be over-regulating the fraternities and sororities, because the town would be coming in and telling them they can't do this practice anymore and they are losing income. So that might be governmental overreach, Leo.
So if, for example, if Special Olympics was gonna do something up there and that wasn't university related, and they were going to try to allow a group to stay there, they can't do that?
No, because I would argue that Special Olympics goes through their conferences and whatever center. So Will Biberstein would be able to write a contract with a fraternity for overflow.
So as long as it's contracted with the university or a collaboration with them in some way, then it's allowed. There's no law.
So what's not allowed then is the single rentals,
Yes.
because the fraternities do that as well.
Yes.
They rent rooms out.
And we've talked to them about that.
Okay.
They are well aware that for a variety of reasons is not okay. It's not okay with the university rules, and it's not okay with town practice for a variety of reasons.
But historically, they have been doing that as well.
Yep, to echo Tom's sentiments, like I'm also in favor of this language. I would only add that I know that the state fire marshal said, yes, this will be fine, but it does make me a little nervous when I read this definition of members and non-members not being able to be in the, like, I guess if they say it's fine, then we're all set. But like, it still does make me a little bit nervous that they might not be reading it correctly. And
Yeah, the good news is, and Jeff doesn't talk about this too often, but in Orono, because of the level of
You get me my shirt,
certification
please.
that it's chilly
Thank
in
you.
Florida, evidently.
get the man his shirt.
So Jeff does not say it often, but Orono is, I think, one of the few municipalities in Maine that carry staff carry the credentials necessary to be the authority having jurisdiction. So unless it reaches a certain threshold, most of the time, we call the fire marshal's office to get their advice and their guidance, but they do a lot of deferring to the town. And
I think in this, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I think in this case, all they did is said, yes, your plan is valid. So everything you're hearing is what we generated internally. It's not necessarily driven by them. We just wanted to double check with them because they do have some overarching authority.
Okay, so it sounds like we're generally ready to move this over to the planning board.
excellent. So this will go on the April 20th planning board agenda. You will see it back here, unless there's a problem and it needs to come back to committee, it will come back here for the May 9th council public hearing. And then land use ordinances, we have to adopt at a subsequent meeting to the public hearing. We're not allowed to have a public hearing and take action in the same meeting. We can always slow things down or stop things if we get public comment that would cause us to want to do something different. Once we've had a public hearing, there can be changes, but they cannot be substantive without going back to the process again. That makes sense?
So while this is pending, because summer programs are starting to gear up,
I will continue to do what we've done, which is to say, if you kind of follow this framework, we're fine. And then when the university calls and asks if it's allowed, I say, you really don't ask that question.
No comments, call. Okay, moving on to item B, an update on the legislative efforts related to implementing the Housing Commission report. And who will be the first to, are you gonna jump in or Sophie? You got nominated, Kyle.
Okay, so I guess a decent amount to go through here. So LD 2003 proposed legislation to increase housing opportunities. I don't want to go through it line by line, going through everything, since there's still probably edits to be made and it's not the final approach, but I wanted to touch on sort of, you know, the general purpose, some general areas of concern that I think we were seeing, some of the language that was removed that probably shouldn't have been, some of the more specific concerns and potential impacts from some of the sections that are still remaining in there. And then, you know, some things that would be nice to see going forward, but may or may not happen. So just to kind of jump in, when the Housing Commission was originally putting together the recommendations that sort of led to the foundation creation of the sections in the bill, I sat in on a couple of meetings with MMA, with some other regional planning members and municipal town managers and planners. So fairly familiar through that process of what some of the recommendations would look like. That group provided some of the recommendations in the initial bill. And in general, I think it's important to note that everyone there was supportive of the overall goal of the bill of providing more housing opportunities. I think it's pretty apparent that this is an issue that needs to be addressed, and there's, you know, a housing shortage and all of those things. I don't think through any of this process have I heard anyone, you know, whether they're neither for or against the bill, whether they're opposed to the bill, anyone who says that, you know, there are those things because they don't think housing needs to be created. It's usually for, you know, they want more detail on something or a different approach taken. So I think the reason that states, and it's not just me, it's happened in other states as well, have started to kind of take this approach of putting forward these bills around housing is because, you know, probably the biggest thing is that at the local level, government can slow down in regards to, you know, encouraging new housing development. You know, projects can be met by a lot of negativity from neighborhoods or, you know, whatever it is, you know, communities that want to stay the same, not change, not add, you know, not upzone, not add increased density, whatever it is. And then there are communities, you know, that do use single family zoning and other exclusionary zoning tools as a means to kind of limit growth on their communities and protect, you know, protect a certain perceived character of that community. And I think when, you know, you listen to some of the legislative processes that have happened, you can see that there probably are some communities in Maine who are opposed to this bill for some of those negative reasons. You know, that mindset does exist. So on some level, the state feels like, okay, we have to come in and we have to force a change. We have to mandate that something actually get done. So on some level, you know, that makes sense. But the way that this bill is proposed to go about it it definitely has a lot of areas of concern. So I think the biggest areas of concern is, one, it doesn't allow for municipalities to take into consideration any unique aspects of their own community. It's just blanket approaches, whether it's, you know, the largest cities or the smallest towns that have no zoning ordinances at all. It's the same approach for every single community. You know, communities in Maine, whether it's a city or a coastal community or a university town, are very different, and housing in those places are very different too. You know, then you add in things like shoreland zoning and growth areas and rural areas, and you know, just the geographical layout of a community. It doesn't really make sense to look at housing exactly the same in all of those cases. To the bill, you know, it takes away a municipality's ability to achieve housing goals in the way that they think works best. There's a lot of different approaches in the bill to try to achieve, you know, more housing opportunities. Whether it's, do we need more, you know, specific low, moderate income housing, or do we need more housing for the elderly to age in place, or do we just need more housing stock in general, and we'll let the market kind of shift it around to say, you know, everyone's going to end up getting a little more. You know, there are a lot of different approaches, and you know, one community may be most interested, and it might be most effective to use one or two of those, and it might be completely irrelevant to have another one in place. You know, but it doesn't really give municipalities the ability to look at that and consider those sorts of things. And finally, I don't think the housing bill currently as it's proposed really reflects other state laws. There's already existing state law around the Growth Management Act, which is the fundamental piece to our comprehensive plan. And everything that goes into long-range planning and looking at the interconnectedness between whatever it is, housing, economic issues, environmental issues, all of those things that go into planning are touched on in that state law. You know, whereas this kind of doesn't consider it at all, and sort of just makes housing the single focus to consider without regard to some of those other things that we generally try to think of all together. And we try to, you know, take our time to make sure what we're doing in one area isn't negatively impacting another area. So those are some of the general concerns, I think, you know, that kind of first jump out when reading it. Next, I wanted to jump into the what I think are what were the two best parts of the bill that ended up getting removed in the most recent amendment. And those would be the sections on the municipal incentive program and the priority development zones. So these were the two pieces that would have really let municipalities you know, choose for themselves the approach that best worked for them. So the municipal incentive program was kind of a 3-year process where municipalities would have kind of taken an inventory of their existing zoning and land use practices in year 1. In year 2, they would have proposed changes to their ordinances to encourage housing opportunities. And in year 3, they would report to the state the results of those changes. And you would get grant funding each year, you know, as the incentive to take part in this. The other section there was the priority development zones, which is a lot of what we've kind of been talking about lately leading up to our next comprehensive plan. And I think this was, I believe it was a recommendation that came from someone at the Greater Portland Council of Governments initially. You know, it's what I was just talking about in the previous section. Priority development zones takes into account all those other things that we look at. So it would let a municipality, you know, I mean, in the bill, it is a mandate. It requires that, you know, each municipality, you know, designates some area as a priority development zone. So it's not an optional thing. It's requiring that a municipality does it. But it's doing so in a way where it still leaves room for the municipality to have some flexibility and to choose what makes sense for their, where they are. So for us, when we talk about increasing growth near businesses, services, public transit, our already built infrastructure, walkability, being next to the university. So places like the Village Commercial or our Commercial 2 area on Park Street, or some of the residential neighborhoods in between those areas. Those would be areas that could have been made priority development zones where we could have looked at increasing zoning, increasing densities, allowing smaller scale multifamily, and it probably would have met the requirement in the bill, and you would have been keeping your growth in your growth area in the areas that make the most sense. So I thought it was a shame that after the public hearing, that was one of the sections that got taken out of the bill.
I don't understand why, though. Where did that pressure come from?
So-
Probably a little retaliatory, maybe, just a little.
Yeah, so in the MMA, the Legislative Policy Committee meeting, Speaker Fechdel had said that was the most, something to the effect of that was the most opposed section in the bill, which is not what I heard
That is not what I heard.
in the meeting, but that's how they got there, I guess. So moving on to some of the remaining sections in the amendment that, would have definitely some impacts on our existing zoning. Some probably good, but there are definitely some challenges that would come along with some of these things. The first is the affordable housing developments. So this section is specific for that low and moderate income housing development. So, those bigger projects probably where you see, proposed multifamily buildings. It could be used for a subdivision, but it's where, in rental housing, the household income for the unit would have to be, less than 80% of the area median income, and in owned housing, the moderate income level would have to be under 120% of the area median income. And in those cases where housing developments met those kind of financial thresholds, you would get a 2.5 times density bonus to whatever the existing zoning allowance was for that district. So the way the bill is written, it says that these only apply in zoning districts where multifamily is allowed. So one thing I'm a little confused by is the next section in the bill says you have to allow 3 and 4 units everywhere, which would mean multifamily is allowed everywhere. So is it talking about, there's this 2.5 times density bonus in areas where you currently allow multifamily, or where you will allow multifamily after the bill is done? If it's where we currently allow multifamily, which I think is the intention, and it would make a lot more sense if it was that way, that would be places like our Commercial 2 and our Village Commercial, where, again, it probably makes sense. Those are some of our denser areas where we allow multifamily housing. If we were going to allow, larger scale, high density, affordable housing developments, those would probably be the places to do it. They're closest to our existing services. So that seems to make the most sense.
It's just a quick question.
Yeah.
What does that mean? 2.5% density bonus? What does that?
So-
mean?
Take our Village Commercial, for instance, or C2 is probably easier, the numbers. So our, like our cluster development, if you did a subdivision in the Commercial 2 and you took advantage of our cluster development, we allow 8 units per acre. So you would be allowed, 20 units per acre.
You would be allowed, or the town would have to allow that? Is
So we
that
would have to allow, I think.
what it's saying?
Yeah,
So
I see.
if you look at our regular zoning, not cluster development, in the C2, you can have one dwelling unit at 15,000 square feet. So you can have, almost 3 units an acre. So it would be 6, 7.
So when you say density bonus, it's a requirement put on the town that you have to allow for.
It's not like we get a bag of cash for having.
When-
Bonus is a little misleading in that context.
Bonus for the developer.
Right.
So one of the things I learned on Friday is that developers really wrote this.
Nah,
So
it's all
one of the things to keep in mind is that the highest priority coming out of the 2014 comprehensive plan was to shrink the allowed density on Park Street in our C1, C2.
C2. So that was bedrooms. So
Because of the student housing
Right.
complexes.
which is in line with this. Shrinking.
No,
You
no,
say shrinking.
they want to expand.
And we would no longer be able to have the moratorium
Yeah.
on development while we figure out the plan for Park Street and services and infrastructure.
We don't have a moratorium.
Well, I mean, like, we would not be able to stop any development.
Yeah.
And this is regardless of the existing infrastructure. So if we have now a much more dense residential infrastructure along Park Street, and we need to upgrade our sewer capacity or something, there's no kickback from the state to help us.
So Jeff, I will tell you, we have a problem with service for sewer on Park Street.
I know.
And so one of the last housing developments that made it in before we could change the ordinance was the Edge, which kind of near the mosque. All I know is like Mrs. Taylor's.
No.
Yeah, all right. And you know. And that came in and it was a higher density than we allow now. But when that came in, it became very clear we were gonna have to fix, upsize a portion of the sewer main on Hillside. It's a $525,000, $550,000 job. And so you say, wow, there's an impact fee, right? Because you want to put development there. If we have to change infrastructure, you have to pay for part of that. Yeah, $17,000 towards a $550,000 job. So and you hear it, I've heard it in explanations, well, there are impact fees, they'll recoup that. It works fine right now. Can't accept that level of flow without fixing it. And it would take us years at our current sewer rate to pay that back.
It doesn't work fine right now. Hillside still gets runoff from that.
That
From those
sewer
developments.
doesn't get, the sewer is different. I was talking about sewer.
Okay, yeah.
I hope we're not getting sewer runoff. That would be bad.
You would hear
Yes.
about that.
Another thing I heard during that, on a similar subject during that work session, was one of the committee members asked the speaker, basically, if I understand this correctly, like, this bill is going to require municipalities basically to go through all of their ordinances with a fine tooth comb to figure out if they're in conflict with any of this new stuff. Does the bill provide any funding for that
Right.
endeavor? And the speaker said, I believe that it does, but my understanding is that it does not. So is that correct? It does not provide any funding
I
for,
don't believe so.
yeah.
And
He's like, I must have missed that line.
even if all the changes were great, the amount of changes in here will take a pretty substantial time to go through and amend every piece of our ordinance.
Right, and all of the financial burden falls to the municipalities.
Add 4 months per section of the ordinance that you want to.
Right, and I mean, a lot of this says, it has to be in effect within a year from now, basically.
So Kyle, why does the Maine Association of Planners support this bill?
So I don't know if I heard the specific reasoning there, but I think in general, a lot of people support the overall goal of adding housing.
Okay,
And some people want to just keep the conversation going, and they think if they say no, they'll get lumped in with communities who are also saying no for the wrong reasons.
okay.
And they don't want to be left out of the conversation. And also, I think I heard other people, have the opinion that, like, well, yeah, it's not perfect and some problems will come up, but it's better than not addressing the problem at all. So, they're probably going to, go forward with it anyway, so I'll just support it.
With reservation.
It seems like a
But
lot of people have faith that they'll
Do the right
listen
thing. Yeah.
to the feedback and make amendments before the bill is put in front of the legislature, but that's not the tone coming from.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the concerns we have about specific elements as they relate to Orono?
Yeah, so that was that's basically it for the affordable housing developments. Those, I think those would be bigger projects, bigger subdivisions, more planned developments. I think you're less likely there to see that have an effect on the individual existing home. Where you will see some of those potentially smaller scale changes is with the next section. So Section 10 on the residential areas, generally up to 4 dwelling units permitted, they amended that to, it's really, if you're building on a new lot, then you can have up to 4 units. If there's an existing structure on the lot, you can have up to 3 units, and one of them can be attached and one of them can be detached. But this is I think this is the biggest potential impact from anything in this bill. And it's the part that makes the least amount of sense from an overall, big picture planning perspective. And I think it's the part that a lot of communities at the last meeting I attended had the most problem with. And it's this idea that single family zoning is bad, and if you have a single family home, that's fine. You can keep on having that single family home, but the person next to you should be able to have 3 or 4 units, whatever it is. And it allows people to, if you live in a property, you can carve off an extra unit or 2 and rent them out, and it allows for those smaller scale changes by individuals to create more housing opportunities instead of relying on big subdivisions and big development projects.
Which on its face is not a bad thing.
Sounds great.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, and it's something that I think we started to look into and really consider going forward, into our next comp plan. It really makes sense, but it only makes sense if you're doing that where you want housing to go. And again, we have a state law that requires communities to have a specific growth area and a specific rural area. So for us, our growth area is primarily east of the interstate, our MDR, Village Commercial, C2. West of the interstate is our, you have some transitional area and then the rural area. It's not sustainable, it's not efficient to encourage growth in your rural areas and just across the board. This is why the priority development zones made a lot more sense. If you were saying, you should require 3 or 4 dwelling units everywhere single family housing is allowed, in your designated priority development zones, that makes a lot of sense. You're building off your existing infrastructure, your services, your response times, all of that. You're creating more walkability for people because you're putting more people in close proximity to businesses, to the university, more people to use bus system, all of that. Putting more people in the forest and agriculture district or the LDR, where we typically want low densities to you know, have more open spaces, have less impact on our natural resources, things like that. It doesn't make sense to just make a blanket standard like that that's applicable across an entire community, across the whole state. And
Can I ask,
Yeah.
I mean, when you say 4 units, like in single family, does that mean no setbacks, no acreage requirements, none of that?
Well, this was another one of those fuzzy areas of conversation during the work group where no one was quite
yeah,
What
sure.
it means?
I think people are, so it states in there that.
It actually says in the current amendment that you have to abide by existing setback requirements.
Yeah, it says you can't make dimensional size requirements or setback distances for multifamily housing greater than what you have for single family housing. So in the MDR, right, we have a 20-foot front yard setback. So you couldn't, you know, now it says, okay, you have to allow 4 units. You couldn't say, okay, for, you know, a 4 unit, you have to have a 30-foot setback. You wouldn't be able
Right.
to. Where the confusion comes in for me is with minimum lot area per dwelling unit. So in, you know, we'll use the MDR as an example. Our minimum lot size in the MDR is 15,000 square feet. But we also allow 2 family dwellings in the MDR. And so you have a minimum lot size of 15,000 square feet, but you have a minimum lot size per dwelling unit of 15,000 square feet. So that means to have a 2-family home in the MDR, you need 30,000 square feet of lot area. And you know, it scales in other zoning districts where multifamily is allowed, it scales up with each unit. So in the village commercial, our minimum lot area per dwelling is 2,500 square feet. So if you have a 4-unit structure, you would need 10,000 square feet of lot area. I don't know if the bill is saying that in the MDR, for instance, you have to allow a 4-unit on a 15,000 square foot lot, or if you could allow it on a 60,000 square foot lot. I don't know when it says, you know, municipal ordinances may not establish dimensional size requirements for multifamily greater than dimensional size requirements for single family housing. So, I mean, the standard is 15,000 square feet per dwelling unit. So that applies to a single family home. You're saying that one dwelling unit needs 15,000 square feet. So it makes sense to me that it would scale up still, even with the bill, that if, you know, we did allow 4 units or 3 units, that you would need an acre and a half. And if,
Just because that
No.
makes sense, is that the way you read it?
so that was also what I got from listening to Speaker Bechdel, but I'm not sure that's, I'm not sure that's how it's written.
Tom has a comment.
I think that the amendment says in any lot that you currently have a single family home, you could have a 4-unit home. I think that's regardless of the size of the lot. I think in my neighborhood where you have a 20,000 square foot requirement, because we're not on public sewer, that I could technically turn my house into a 4-unit building.
Yes, I'm not sure. I don't think it's the intent of it. I think the intent is to have,
I think that's right. I think that is the intent of it.
I don't know.
That's the part that scares me the most about all this is that
But
They'll
the-
work it out and we'll make it.
I think the piece, and we're kind of getting, I think, into the weeds a little bit, but I think part of what is concerning to me is that idea of, well, there isn't gonna be rulemaking because they're actually changing statute. That we have to, I mean, if it had to go through rulemaking, you'd have some level of confidence that we might be able to fix it. But it's gonna go to the legislature, they're gonna vote, and it's changing statutory language. So
So they'll be voting on that,
they're gonna be voting on the language change,
which
so,
we haven't seen yet.
well, kind of, sort of. kind of sort of, there's an amendment in there. But the piece that concerns me too is things like, any dwelling has to meet the minimum, dwelling size allowed by the, International Builders Code. And you would think, oh, that's our safeguard. It's 190 square feet.
So I think that's specifically in the ADU section.
Oh, all
not
right,
in
yeah.
this section.
I also had, I think, a slightly different, I mean, maybe I'm just reading a different section from Tom, but it seems like let's allow us structures with up to 4 dwelling units per lot, if that lot does not already contain existing dwelling.
Right, so
Otherwise,
if,
it's,
yeah, it's 3
Yeah.
units if it has.
Yep.
Okay.
But I think that was changed in the amendment, so it was 4
Yeah.
across the board before now. But I think the potential impact there is if you have the single family home on 15,000 square feet or 20,000 square feet, and you can now create 3 or 4 units there, that's a huge potential change to the community and how housing is used in the community, especially Orono, where rentals are such a common use of residential structures. I mean, that would, the number one use of any residential structure in the community would become the rental of housing to a college student, because you could split it up into 4 units and you could rent them all out.
Which is what I tried to explain in my testimony, like you're actually doing the opposite of creating affordable housing in Orono.
Right.
Right.
specifically.
And I mean, we talked about it, we should be treating, college rentals just the same as we shouldn't be exclusively, prohibiting them from certain areas necessarily. But that doesn't mean you want to eat up your entire housing stock with that single use, when the goal of this bill is to provide, all sorts of housing.
well, and when you listen to Speaker Fecto and Senator Hickman talk about this bill in the public hearing, their vision of a dwelling unit, it is a unit that has like families in it. And one of the things we know in Orono is that families kind of expect different things than groups of college students. And it's not bad or good, but we've had so much conflict in neighborhoods where we've tipped the balance and have conflict between families and large groups of college students. So I think it's really kind of interesting, and what we tried to point out is it's really important that it not be a one size fits all, because I think it's different from different how we want to attack.
Right, and I think it's hard to get across because it's something specific to here that a lot of communities the response is always, from the speaker on this topic is, well, not everyone in a neighborhood is going to do that. You might get a couple people here and there. Well, that's probably true in a community where you lean more towards owner-occupied housing and you have, a few rentals scattered here and there. The majority of them will keep their single-family home. Maybe someone switches to a 2-family, and maybe you get a couple of these 3 or 4 unit buildings. But that could very easily not be the case here. On the other hand, if it did come back that how that's to be interpreted was we could apply that our existing minimum lot area per dwelling unit, and we could kind of scale that up for each new unit that's being proposed, then I think this would have pretty minimal impact, because if you're talking, you need an acre to an acre and a half in the MDR to have a 3 or 4 unit. Not many lots in our MDR have that lot size. So you'd be unlikely to see much of a difference.
So we're not gonna see, then we wouldn't see like one of the poor residents of North Main
Right.
having like 100 North Main on one side of them, and then the lot on the other side has suddenly like 3 or 4 units.
Right, and in that case too, I think the concern about sprawl would also not be as big, because right now, if you're saying that, in your rural area, you allow housing at some low density, so, you can allow people to live there, and take part in whatever agricultural use they do in your rural area. But now all of a sudden you're saying, oh, you can actually have 4 units on that lot. And now your rural area is a great place to develop housing. All that's doing is encouraging sprawl. It's encouraging people to start developing, skip, more efficient, sustainable pieces of land, and infill. It just goes completely against I think, the intent and the goal of the bill. And, you could have, just the requirement for more roads, more infrastructure being built out further distances. You're encouraging auto dependency, all of that stuff. But if it's saying, right now, in our agriculture district, there's a 4-acre minimum lot size. If you say for 4 unit, you need 16 acres, and there aren't many lots that can take advantage of that. So I don't know, that's the biggest area of clarification for me is in that piece. And I think that's the potential biggest impact on our community is with that.
I think the other potential impact is once you say housing is a right and you must, that takes away some of our control to be able to not over-regulate, but smooth out the conflict. And one way that a town council, long before I got here, smoothed out conflict while still creating an opportunity for people to use their property to make money and also bring more housing units was that accessory dwelling unit. So we've had that ordinance in place for a very long time. But instead of creating effective duplexes all over the place or more than that, we've said in a single family home, you can have it. It can be up to 500 square feet and it's deed restricted to a owner occupied. So you can tell in my house that there was once a additional dwelling unit. It became not owner occupied when the church owned it. And you can see where the kitchen used to be, but isn't. So, I think that's one of the ways that council felt like it could allow for more development, but still not have too much density and too much of that neighborhood concept.
Speaking of owner occupancy, do I understand correctly too, that as written currently, we would not be able to have any more owner occupancy requirements on any of our?
Yeah, so that kind of
That's bad.
transitions into the next
Sorry.
section.
That's
So
very thoughtful, but that's how.
the next section is on accessory dwelling units. So I'll just say ADUs from now on. But yeah, so he was saying, we allow accessory dwelling units. This wouldn't be too much of a change in that sense, but we do have some specific standards that we put in place that the bill would sort of overrule. So the one thing the bill would continue to allow is it says a municipality may impose a maximum size for accessory dwelling units. So our 500 square foot or whatever we wanted to make that number could stay in place. Originally, the bill didn't have that language in there, which made no sense because if you can have an accessory dwelling unit of unlimited size, then how is it accessory? It's just a second principal structure, which we don't allow. So I think that was a good addition at least, but yeah, the bill does go on to say that, municipalities in adopting an ordinance, can establish alternative criteria that are less restrictive. So yeah, I don't think we would be able to say one of the units has to be owner occupied. We have another standard where our ADUs can only be occupied by 2 people. So instead of our normal 3 unrelated or 5 unrelated people that we use normally for occupancy, in ADUs, we only allow 2 people. That's probably not a huge deal because when you're talking about a smaller structure, it's probably unlikely that it's going to be rented or occupied by more than 2 people anyway. But yeah, the owner occupied piece would be a pretty big one because now, right, any any rental property could essentially just add a second smaller unit, either attached or detached, which is something we haven't done in the past. Previously, if you were a non-owner occupied unit and you wanted to add a second unit, you would have had to meet the qualifications for a full-on 2-family dwelling unit, and you wouldn't be able to be an ADU.
And just for the benefit of those who haven't sat through our very lengthy conversations about owner occupancy, that is one of the major calming devices that we have at our disposal for keeping harmony in the student, family, merged, blended neighborhoods.
Yeah. So I think it's important to realize that while our ordinances around housing and zoning can probably be greatly improved and in a lot of ways, and some of our minimum lot areas and parking requirements and things like that are probably lean on the conservative side and could be definitely improved in specific areas at least. We don't have any exclusively single family zones in Orono. We allow at least 2-family dwellings everywhere we allow residential uses, along with ADUs. So while some of those minimum lot sizes could probably be dropped to make some of those uses more feasible, we don't really have any exclusive single family zones in the community. And that's not even getting into the idea of cluster development and creating, condo townhome style developments, which would also be allowed everywhere. So yeah, that's sort of the kind of specific impacts that jumped out at me as I was going through it. I think in general, what would be really great and what would make a lot of sense is if instead of coming forward with a bill like this, if the state created some clear housing goals that municipalities could then go out and implement different ways to achieve. Define those housing goals under the Growth Management Act, along with other existing guidelines that go into comprehensive plan development. The state could offer incentives and best practices and resources for municipalities to take advantage of that would aid in achieving those housing goals. And then municipalities would be able to choose the strategy that works best for them and their community. And that's really where the incentive program and the priority development zones were going. So like I said, it was kind of a shame that they went away from that and went more in favor of the blanketed mandates. So as far as where it's going next, in that email that Kate had sent, she said, according to the Labor and Housing Committee discussion on this issue, final bill language will be decided via email communications amongst members. In other words, it is likely the public will be afforded little, if any, time to review the bill before it is presented to the entire legislature for debate, which doesn't sound very promising as far as taking time to really sit down and implement some of the things that municipalities, I think, have really been calling for. I think
Is it possible that that Labor and Housing will table this bill before?
No.
doesn't seem-
So are they leaning on to pass? They're
Oh, yeah.
leaning on to pass,
They all-
okay. And so then it would be, the legislature would be the next step. Okay.
Cheryl and Tom, did you have anything to add from the legislative policy committee? Tom, you're on mute.
There. I don't think there's any question that some version of this bill is going to pass in this session. That was certainly the consensus of the meeting that we attended on Friday, and that the only opportunity to make any changes in it at this point are going to be lobbying your legislators. Maine Municipal Association is still opposed to the bill, and the advocacy group for MMA is lobbying legislators in that direction, but municipalities are being encouraged to contact their legislators. I suspect that at least one of our representatives is a supporter of this bill, but I don't know that for a fact.
Tom,
Yeah, Lori testified in favor. of this.
Yeah.
Tom, would you be willing to reach out to Jim Dill?
Yes. Absolutely.
Do you want me to provide you with a copy of our testimony?
Sure.
Okay.
And how about, now
Um,
does Representative Perry still represent part of Orono?
He does. Do you want to reach out to him too, or?
I may have already. I'll double check. But yes, I think we should reach out to both.
There's also a note here in the background about wanting to know whether we would like you to say anything on behalf of the town to the committee members or members of the legislature. So is that something you're still interested in hearing?
So I'm more interested in hearing if my direction had changed, because my direction was vehemently oppose the parts of the bill that would be bad. Like make sure that we are complimentary of the parts that we think would be right for Orono, and praise efforts to do something around the issue of affordable housing, which I did.
Right.
And the question now is.
Also, Kyle's specific laundry list there of things that would be helpful, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe they'd be interested in that information.
What is a little bit unfortunate, so the meeting was on Thursday with Speaker Fecto, and I was at a training on Friday with Kate. And unfortunately, Kate's perspective was that LPC members were trying very hard to acknowledge the benefit of trying to do something about affordable housing and give some constructive feedback on how to improve the bill and take out some of the gray areas, and that was not well received. Kate's perspective is that this is turned from policy making to political, which makes it really hard to make policy framed arguments, but I think we continue to do what we can.
Such a shame, and it's so frustrating because this issue is so important, and I just feel like everyone's.
Is Orono, you think Orono is just such a different animal than 90, like than what, 80, 90, 70, 50%?
Well, they also took out the short-term, didn't they take out the provision that was protecting like the short-term housing situation? So there was some level of protection for tourist towns that might be negatively impacted by all of this, but they took that out in the amendment, I believe. If I heard the speaker, or at least that's what he said was.
Right.
That's what he said
Yeah, I
was in
don't
the
know if
amendment.
that's- I know, yeah, there were some things in there with the 30-day number. I don't know if those.
The answer is, I think Orono is very different. I also think that a lot of what Orono faces is a little bit more comparable with what is faced in Southern Maine, which is where they're responding to some not so great headlines around affordable housing getting fixed. So
And when I made the specific, like, when I talked about the specific ways that this would impact Orono as a college town, and that would actually encourage predatory college housing development, that would not be good for our affordable housing market. Representative Gear asked me, she was basically like, well, could you guys do something about that? Like, just make rules that college students can't live in certain places. And I was like, girl, no, that is a civil rights violation. So, but you know, it was like, she was like trying to ask me, I think if, I mean, we're friends, like I know, but she was trying to ask me if there was something that we could do about it. And I said, that's something you would have to figure. I can't do that. That would be in your hands if you want to put a provision in your bill about that. I'm not going to touch it.
You go to jail.
So-
That's really the point, though. It's instead of just applying a blanket approach, just let the municipality, require that something be done, and give a bunch of options. If there was, actual planning presence at the state level that could develop resources for communities to use, Because I don't know how smaller communities, how are they going to implement any of this?
Is there a chance, and I'm just thinking about that, smaller communities like Bradley or Milford, but just small ones, is there a chance that they don't have nearly the regulation in place? That like they
So
almost
I-
don't have codes
So
and
I
things like
came
that?
from a
Yeah, there are
community
places that
that
don't have
had,
zoning.
So,
yeah,
There's
I,
a couple hundred, I think.
yeah.
what's that couple hundred like that?
But there are also places that probably are not going to
People
get
aren't going to-
people,
Right, so
yeah.
it's a non-issue and they're just like, okay, thanks, we'll put that in the file.
Okay, well, yeah, unfortunately, some of those municipalities that are against this for the wrong reasons didn't help us in the testimony either. I didn't say that. Anyway, anything else anyone wants to say about this topic before we?
Just curious if Old Town would be in a similar predicament as us, or do they not have the type of zoning as extensive as we do?
I don't think that Old Town has the same issues at all. with that.
What is?
They have more of a mix in demographic. They have a lot more families. They have a lot more young people. Their housing is more dispersed. So people who live in Old Town, the multifamily student homes tend to be more interspersed. Old Town also just looks at things very differently than the town of Orono in so many different ways.
Just thinking about Jim Dill and his, because that's obviously.
I don't think that they would be for it, you know, but they don't, I'm not even sure they have a planner. Do they have a planner? I don't think they have a planner.
Final thing, the timing of this is going to be fairly terrible too, because it aligns right,
April, third week of April.
right, it aligns right with the start of us diving into the next comp plan.
Yeah.
So the comp plan is supposed to be our long-range planning document where we set the goals of the town for a decade. And now we're starting out that process with being forced to implement all of these standards that will drastically change the community, and we have no idea what the impact will be, and having to build a long-range plan on top of that. How can we plan in the long term for something that we don't even have the faintest idea what the impacts of will be?
And no control, and no control.
And having to do them at the same time, just from a time management standpoint.
The other piece though, and it's why we always suggest a more incremental approach to land use, is if you open the door wide and you allow anything, kind of, we had the same discussion, we talked about marijuana establishments. You open the door wide and you allow everything, and then you decide, ooh, that's a conflict, and that's a conflict, and that's a conflict, and we need to do something about it. You can do something about it, but now you have these issues that were conflicts that now are grandfathered uses that can continue until they decide to stop. So that's one, when you open the door wide open and you say 4 units everywhere without knowing what that's going to look like, if you then need to peel it back because it wasn't a great policy, you're stuck with the impact that resulted in you wanting to pull it back. Incremental is good.
Well, that was depressing. Shall we move on?
Well, if Kyle has the good news now, he's gonna deliver, right?
No, this is better.
No, he doesn't, there's no, yeah, this isn't like compliment criticism. We're not, yeah,
I guess
Criticism sandwich.
no sandwich.
I maybe want to just clarify what the sort of action item coming out of the meeting is. It's essentially what staff is directed to sort of do on council's behalf in terms of advocacy on this issue. Is
So
that-
staff had already taken a step forward of opposing the elements of this bill, primarily the ADUs and the multifamily. Asking people to return to the Growth Act, strongly supporting the development, priority development zones, supporting the development of a better state presence, probably in the Department of Agriculture, to support municipal planning efforts moving forward. in general agreement that we should all be looking at increasing housing, understanding that it's different in every community.
And given the sort of trajectory of this bill, do we think that it matters a ton what we as Orono do moving forward, or?
So what I do know is that I've been told by a representative that if I don't show up and testify against something at some point, I foreclose my right to ever criticize it ever for moving forward. And I don't ever want to be in that position again. No, it's not my sister. Could have been though.
So sounds like something she would say.
And
So-
another like just process question is I know that I'm a new council member who is not officially on this committee, so I don't know whether it is relevant what my opinions are or whether
Anybody
I'm
who
Always
shows
relevant.
up, yeah,
Okay.
anybody who shows up to any committee meeting gets to speak and have a voice and vote if there are ever votes. which-
great.
I come-
Prerogative as a council.
Cool. Well, I guess I'll just briefly say, thanks for everyone's attention to this issue. I do think that putting priority development zones back in the bill sounds like a really good move that I would support. I would love it if they could leave flexibility to encourage owner-occupied rentals, because I think that makes a lot of sense for Orono and the community that we are. I personally am, I think, okay with the change to a sort of 4 units allowed in our outer districts, but I don't like the slippery slope to housing complexes. So that's kind of, those are my feelings on that, in brief.
Anybody else before we? Thank you very much, Kyle. Sorry for your frustrations. They are shared. All right, moving on to item number 3 is Community Development Committee meeting, which I will turn over to Jeff.
Sure. Okay, we have 3 items for Community Development Committee tonight. The first is an update on town climate action planning efforts, which I believe is Bell remotely.
It is Belle.
The magic of technology.
There she is.
All right. Hopefully everybody can hear me. I had to do a little bit of a scramble getting back here and getting the system set up. So the Regional Climate Action Adaptation Plan RFP went out in January. We got responses back in February. We did a couple of interviews, and we narrowed the choice down to 1 consultant. And this consultant, I should say, 1 consultant group, because there are multiple consultants involved in this RFP response. So that 1 consultant provided us with a proposal that was 50% over our budget. So we've had to go back and talk with them a little bit more about kind of I don't want to say we value engineered the project, but talk with them a little bit more about, what were their assumptions? Are there things that the communities could do in order to lower the cost? And at the same time, we were looking at, are there ways for the participating municipalities, Bangor, Orono, and BACS, to kind of increase funding in order to, at the very least, get our phase 1 of this project kicked off. So phase 1 of the project is what's called a greenhouse gas baseline and vulnerability assessment, particularly sea level rise, and how sensitive each community within the BACS region is to sea level rise. Now, for those who are new to acronym CITY, BACS stands for the Bangor Area Comprehensive Transportation System, and it is composed of the urbanized areas of the greater Bangor region. So there's places like Milford and Vesey, as well as Old Town, Orono, Herman, Hamden, Bangor, Brewer. So all of that kind of region is included in the BACS region. So the greenhouse gas assessment is going to be, it's going to look at how much natural gas is used in the area, how much electricity is used in the area, how much gasoline as an estimate based on traffic counts is used in the area. Anything that kind of creates carbon emissions is going to try to be quantified and assessed and laid out by community. So each community will then have a baseline for that. The vulnerability assessment looks at if sea level rise occurs, how sensitive is your particular community, in our case, of course, Orono, to that sea level rise, and what does that do to your infrastructure, and what does it do to your emergency response, and what does that do for your future planning. So phase one is kind of our baseline of here's where you currently are. We believe that we have a funding method forward for phase one to engage the consultant. The contract has not yet been formally signed as far as I am aware, but I believe that that's moving forward. And then phase two is much more community involvement, and it is about kind of mitigation.
May I ask a quick question about phase one before you jump into phase two?
Sure.
Great. So sea level rise, definitely more important for some towns than for us, but I am curious if there's anything in this about projected sort of future climate effects in other waterways, like for example, culvert size and frequency of heavy storm events is a climate impact that's definitely relevant, even where sea level rise might not be.
So it's kind of addressed because it looks at all the infrastructure, but that's really much more addressed in phase two, which is, okay. So phase two is mitigation strategies, because it kind of lays out what might happen if you have, you know, those higher frequency storms, and how sensitive is your community to different actions that you may take that will reduce your greenhouse gas emissions and reduce the results from any you know, outside storms. So what you're looking at that's where a lot of policy might come into play when you guys are talking about increasing the walkability of the community. All of those kind of actions that the council could take that will reduce greenhouse gases will be assessed. And I'm sorry, I have a dog that's wanting to walk into my meeting here. I'm sitting on the floor and she's trying to sit on me, and it's the 90-pound dog. All right, so that comes in that will come in phase two. And so what phase two will be is a lot of public outreach in terms of what are your concerns about your community? Where do you think your community is most vulnerable? What do you think your community would be most likely to embrace? So it may be, as you talk about housing density so that you're creating a more walkable community, that might be something that Orono says, you know, our town has made this a priority. We think that this would be very important. But another community that is still part of the urbanized area, but a little bit more rural, might say that just doesn't work for our community. We're much more interested in expanding bus service or something. So it's going to be kind of as each community decides what level they're going to participate in, there's 2 different levels for this phase 2. Tier 1, which is what Orono is wanting to participate at, has that customized. Each individual community gets public meetings, public outreach, individual consideration. And tier 2 would be taking the region as a whole and saying, these are the types of mitigations that you could consider. And part of those mitigations would also be, how do you kind of future-proof yourself against what will be occurring? Sophie, do you want me to touch on the grant application that went out as well?
At a very, very high level, because time is getting away from us.
Super high level. We submitted the community action grant application last week, 2 weeks ago. Time is slipping away. And there were 3 projects that were submitted as part of that application. One is funding to support the Orono's kind of share of the regional plan. The second would be to fund the environmental assessment of town buildings. We had 5 town buildings in that on the list. And this was something that council had considered in the budget last year, and ultimately decided that not to fund it, but to look for grant opportunities. So this is a great grant opportunity. And it's also providing us with a baseline so we can better understand how to make improvements. And when we do make improvements, how to measure how effective those improvements were. And then the final piece of the grant was to support the development of a, for lack of a better term, we're currently calling a sustainability and weatherization fair. And this is primarily aimed at educating the public, because while the town does control, you know, the energy use of municipal buildings, there are far more residential buildings out there that are using a lot of energy and putting out greenhouse gases. So that's, we're trying to support the development of the educational system for that system as well. I think that's it.
Great. Are there any questions of Bell or process questions or?
Bell, when do you expect to hear back on our success in these grants?
May is what they had given us as a time frame.
Thank you.
We should have every success with this one though, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
Is that grant funding what you alluded to earlier, saying you think we have funding?
So the way that they're moving forward right now is the regional group BACs had funding for both phase 1 and phase 2 identified, and instead of using the funding for phase 2, they're going to shift it all to phase 1 so that we can start the project. And the hope is that when we start the project and we kind of get some really good regional information out there, that perhaps more communities will also want to buy in onto phase 2.
That funding money that all of the communities put in?
If BACS funding, no, that's planning money that comes through the federal government because they're the metropolitan planning agency.
Okay.
Transportation planning, but greenhouse gases, transportation, we're making it all one.
There's another grant too, back of this one, after this one comes through. There'll be another one.
So,
Right, another community action grant round will come in September.
right. So the reason that this is on the agenda is not that we need anything from council other than to tell us if we were really going astray. But by the time we get through all of these grant fundings and what BACS is putting into this effort, we're going to spend a lot of time and money. And so if we are going astray, we need to know before all of that is spent. So the plan is to periodically put this in front of Jeff and have him put it on the agenda for us to talk about.
Right, this is the first time we've heard about it or spoken about it, but it's good to be updated. So, all right. So as Sophie said, the hour is getting late, but our next item is to review June proclamations recognizing Pride Month and Juneteenth. And although they are the same agenda item, I think in terms of language, we should address them individually. I'm going to preface this by saying that we have another Juneteenth item on the agenda, the finance section, so we're really only addressing the language of the proclamation now. And our decision, of course, as Sophie provided us in the background, is to move on the proclamations, provide guidance if we want to revise them, or elect not to issue them. Can we talk about the Juneteenth proclamation first? Juneteenth is, as you know, both a federal and state recognized holiday. And I think to the town's credit, beginning last year, we issued a pretty strong proclamation in support of Orono's commitment to Juneteenth. If you've had a chance to read through it, I wonder if there are any recommendations you would have to change it at all?
I have no reservations about moving ahead with it. I read it and I think it looks good.
Actually, in an ironic twist, since I wrote it, I do have a recommendation. Just the circumstances where this came about, a counselor had mentioned shortly before our June meeting, like wanting to potentially do this. And in order to spare Sophie a weekend of a bunch of extra work at the last minute, I volunteered, as I frequently do, to write the bulk of it. But it also, this is a document of the past. And I think that one of the things that's missing for me as I read it over again is, I think that it could go just a smidge further to make a stronger connection to the community itself, because that's one of the things that we've agreed, that our proclamations and our resolutions should have a very strong tie to Orono specifically, not just making a general statement about the world. And although there's some of that there in my original draft, I think it could go just a little bit further, in particular that since that was drafted, there has been a lot of progress on our DEI work and moving towards having our JEDI committee and the outpouring of, interaction with the community around that subject. And so I think that I probably could add just one more bit at the end that really more strongly ties it to Orono as a community. If folks were interested.
Are you willing to?
I never do this without volunteering my time.
Then can I ask for one more change?
Yes.
Okay, on the fourth whereas, it says, whereas news of the Emancipation Proclamation did not reach the most distant slave states until 2.5 years later. It's not that it just didn't reach them. It's that the news was actively obstructed from reaching Texas. And I think it would be, I don't know, you guys can tell me I'm wrong, but I would love to recognize that not only is Juneteenth a celebration of great emancipation of people, but it's also a celebration of doing away with the barriers that prevented their emancipation. So in that fourth whereas, if we could make it more, it's not that it just didn't reach, that in fact, the institutions of slavery were finally overcome, right? Intentionally by people who wanted to free slaves. So that's my one.
Can I ask a process question?
Yeah.
So for June proclamations, our preference would be to vote on them in May, so that they're like there and ready to go for June. Are you all right with those changes being made and then just brought forward to the meeting on the 9th? Or do you want to try to slide this into one of our non-existent community?
I mean, would folks be comfortable if I tried to get this drafted well in advance of the May meeting so everyone had access to it?
So I could do one of my infamous, this is what is here, this will be what goes in the packet unless I hear from anybody by this date.
And anybody would then speak to Sophie and Sophie would speak to me.
Sounds like a good idea.
That's good.
Excellent. Moving on to proclaiming June as Pride Month. Any comments on the language in this?
This
Good.
one also looks good.
Excellent. Makes great connections to our community's history and involvement in this issue.
Are we to a point that after this, these can become kind of pro forma like others, or are these ones that we want to talk about every year?
I think in light of our commitment to DEI, we need to at least keep them on the agenda. That doesn't slow
Keep
our
them on
business.
the agenda to, just to remind folks that we do them.
Just to read through them every year. I mean,
Yeah.
So you would at a council meeting have an order to adopt it. My question is whether or not you want it to go through committee. And if you want it to go through committee, that's fine. It's just different than the other annual ones we've made.
I'd say that it should continue to go through committee, not because I'm concerned that a future council might want to not do it, but because issues around diversity, equity, and inclusion are constantly evolving and changing. And so I would, unlike, the Arbor Day proclamation, like I don't expect there to be a lot of change in how we talk about trees. But I think that how we talk about these issues is flexible, and it's like, I want these to be more of living documents personally. So I would like to.
Yeah, and certainly the suggestions that have been made tonight on this document would reflect the need to review it from time to time. I think there were some very good suggestions made.
awesome. Moving on to our third item, municipal review committee. It's kind of a matter, I believe this is Sophie.
So I'm gonna start the way I start every conversation about the municipal review committee and just disclose that I have been on the municipal review committee for a very long time, 18 years, something like that. I currently serve as the treasurer. That said, it's a volunteer job, so it's not like I get any personal.
Resume builder.
Oh, yeah. So there's a lot of history with MRC, and I can answer questions, but in the interest of time, what I do want to say is that the MRC Board of Directors offer a stalking horse bid, which is a minimum, we set a minimum purchase price to acquire the Hamden Municipal Solid Waste Processing Plant, which is currently shuttered on MRC-owned land. That minimum purchase price was $1.5 million. They, as part of the agreement, they would have to pay off the existing liens, the real estate, and any amounts that MRC has paid for utilities, snow plowing, repairs, maintenance, etc., with a floor on that of $1 million. So after being shuttered and bondholders not talking to us at all and everybody walking away, we finally got a receiver appointed and are moving forward. This does not mean that MRC is buying it. It means that it's forcing the receiver to put this out to a bid. And it, unfortunately, the bondholders had people come forward at one point that were agreeing to make them whole, which instead of 1.5 million was more like 90 million. So the goal here is to get somebody who will buy this as a going concern that is going to open it up to process waste with the current technology, utilizing the permits that are already in place with DEP. The closing date the sale would have to close on or before June 30th. And if nobody comes forward or can't close, then it would fall back to MRC. So the reason that I'm here is that MRC is a membership organization. Town of Orono happens to be a member of that organization. Much like how the town council has lots of authority in making decisions that it thinks is best for the town, the MRC Board of Directors is empowered with lots of authority. Much like the charter bounds that authority and allows for referendum for council, the bylaws for MRC bound that authority and allow for a referendum of sorts. We call it a membership meeting. to happen. We received this notice of fundamental matters, which is what triggers the notice to the communities that there is an action being taken, that they have the right to call for a member meeting. You have to have at least 60,000 tons of trash to get to a member meeting. Considering that all of the trash is about 105 ton, that's a lot. And it absolutely purposefully so, much like the council threshold level is quite high. So the question in front of council today is whether or not you wish me to send a notice that we wish to hold a membership meeting. We have 3,750 ton and nobody has called for a meeting yet. However, I did not want the 30 days to go by without giving council the opportunity, simply because there could be an argument that I am conflicted in making.
So this is our notice. This is our notice right here today of the fundamental matters, the fundamental matter. This is our notice today.
The town received notice, the
When?
document on the 1st.
Okay,
Well, I think I probably opened it on the 5th or something like that.
okay. But this is the first time that we're seeing it,
The
right?
council was.
Oh, so we have 2 days to call a member meeting if we wanted to,
But you can't call the member meeting. All we would do is give notice,
that we wanted a member meeting.
and then our tonnage would add up with everybody
Okay.
else's tonnage.
So when are other councils in this 115 town, when have they been presented with this? Have they seen this?
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody has?
Yeah,
Seen it,
everybody-
all right,
everybody's
everybody's seen it, okay. So I agree. I mean, I know a little bit about the background of this, of what's happening. What would the membership meeting only be for people to oppose the buying of the,
Yes,
okay, that was my,
Yep.
so that's the only thing that they
So-
would need to,
the board
get
voted
together.
in the
Okay.
affirmative. This
Right.
would be the member's opportunity to
Okay.
overturn the vote.
okay. So some of the questions that I have, I mean, I understand what's happening with the offer to purchase the plan. I understand what's going on. If, see how I can say this, if the plant is sold to the MRC, if that happens,
Mhm.
all right, do the contracts that we have, the joint agreements, will there also be another opportunity for the member towns? Even if it's sold to somebody else, but if it goes into, to look at the contracts again as a way to kind of negotiate, or is that going to be off the table?
The only way we would be able to try to renegotiate contracts is if MRC wasn't taking our waste,
Okay,
providing it a place to go at the tonnage that it
Okay.
required. If the plant, so let's say they sold it now,
right,
and the plan ahead of us is that it should, if MRC bought it, the plan would be that it would be up and going by the end of the calendar, at the end of the calendar
June
year.
30th, right?
No,
December 31st.
December 31st.
Okay.
If they bought it and couldn't make good on it, then you would be able to try to follow default.
Okay.
of the agreement.
Okay, so here's this does not have to do with the fundamental matter, but it does have to do with Fiberite and the plant itself, purchasing the plant itself and the technology that's used with the plant. And what has happened in recent months with the state of Maine is the PFAS concern. So the plant itself makes briquettes, makes pulp to burn out of our plastic. If the PFAS issue comes up again as that when you burn a certain type of plastic, right? And now we're putting it out into the air, right? Just like incineration. Where do we stand if we own, if the communities now own a plant that can't be put into operation again? And this is just this is a speculation, this is a theoretical, this has just started to become an issue with the state of Maine.
So if you talk to PERC, burning PFAS is the only way you can actually get rid of them. If you listen to them.
Right?
Number two.
It's not what I've heard,
Yeah,
but
but-
anyway,
I think the second thing is just to understand that this plant, briquettes,
right. The
are
briquettes and-
one of a multitude of products. There is the biogas that we know it makes. It is the idea of reducing the recycling and pulling stuff out, washing, recycling, so it meets that 2% dirty
Right,
level. So there are lots of different places. I think the other thing to think about too is that currently MRC holds the permits.
yes,
So that gives the municipalities a voice in what it chooses or doesn't choose to buy or sell, make as commodities out of.
I guess my concern with these findings, with the whole PFAS thing that's happening right now in the state of Maine, is wondering if we have a plan B, if that plant cannot be operable because of this. And of course, this is a science, this is science-based, right? They're gonna have to send people in because nobody can get PFAS out of the water right now. I mean, there's no treatment for it. There's nothing. But are we gonna get stuck again with a situation where they can't use the technology? And like I said, this may not be the time for that conversation, but questions.
So the answer to that question is, I don't know. And the reason that I say that is because there are no guidelines right now in terms of PFAS. I guess the question at the end of the day is, what's the alternative?
Right.
What's the alternative? Our alternative, if we don't go with MRC with this particular project, our alternative is to landfill, which is equally morally not good for
No,
the
it's at the
environment.
bottom. of the
It's at the
hierarchy.
bottom.
Yeah,
We would say we could go to PERC, but PERC is having difficulty keeping up with a portion of the MRC waste at this point. So what we have with the plant when it was designed is a plant that is able to morph and change and is flexible in terms of the amount and type of waste and how it processes. So I think we look at work with DEP as Mike has been doing all along and move from there. But, I have a hard time throwing away a $6.3 million investment that the municipalities have made in this plant because there are unknowns that we may or may not have to address, I guess, is the concern.
right. And I guess my concern is getting locked into a situation again that we can't use.
If
because
worse
of the
comes to
whole-
worse, at $1 million of debt to buy it,
Right,
rip the stuff that's inside out and put new stuff in.
So is there, any-
Unfortunately, we duck out of bed early.
okay.
so is there any appetite to instruct Orono to call for a membership meeting for the MRC?
No,
No,
I hate to drag on,
What's
but I don't know.
Sophie loves to talk about trash.
I don't know I don't understand the relationship, I guess, so just maybe I'll try and be
Okay.
direct and you can be direct back.
Okay.
MRC, they put a bid in, does that mean we put a bid in, do we fund them? Where do they get their money to put the bid in?
Well, part of it's our money. So the municipal, I can't do this short, I'm sorry, but municipal review committee was formed by a variety of municipalities, Orono being one of them, back in the early 1990s when PERC was failing, Mascot Energy Recovery. we all came together, each municipality individually had their own contract with PERC. Those municipalities created MRC to oversee those contracts with PERC. As time went on with that, multiple things happened. One of the things that happened, it ended up, they ran into financing problems. It was supposed to be $10 a ton, ended up at, it was supposed to be $50 a ton, which everybody had to be refinanced. Back Bangor Hydro had ownership interest in PERC. The municipalities bought ownership interest in PERC to pay for their guarantee of trash so that it could be refinanced. At some point, so then layered on top of that was this preferential rate that state law came in and said, Bangor Hydro, you have to pay a higher rate for these kilowatt hours. So all the ratepayers in the Bangor Hydro district were paying more in their electricity to buy per kilowatt hours. Bangor Hydro decided enough of that. We're not going to do this for the next 20 years. So instead, we will sell it to you now. And MRC got money to oversee Bangor Hydro's interest, and the municipalities got a windfall of about $13 million. So without doing anything, all MRC joining members got an allocable share of $13 million. That money MRC managed over time. It got up to a high of about 26 million. In 2018, when it was time for these contracts to sunset, there was no provision for them to continue with PERC. After 2018, the partnership ended. We tried to extend our partnership arrangement. I got to fly out to Minneapolis. It was a blast, but we couldn't come to an agreement. And MRC decided to follow a different path, which ultimately ended up with the postal facility. There were some communities that laughed at that point, and they took their money that was part of that Bangor Hydro windfall and also proceeds from PERC, because PERC was getting 17 cents a kilowatt hour as opposed to $1.50, which is what it was at the time. And the those communities left and did other things. So some of them went directly to landfill, some of them went to equal main if they were more on the fringe. There are all sorts of different options at that point. The town of Orono decided to enter into a joint agreement with the MRC. So it's kind of like we are the MRC, but the MRC has no assets. It manages all the member communities' assets.
They have the authority to put a bid on this thing.
They
Without
well, that's what
sponsorship from the communities that own.
the MRC, yes, in the bylaws that all the communities agreed to when they went to the joint, when they signed on to the joint agreement. The MRC board has the ability to make that decision. However, that's what the notice of fundamental matter is to say, we've made this decision, now you have 30 days to tell us that it's to call a member meeting and overturn the decision.
But we
Which,
can't call a member meeting because we need 60,000
right,
tons.
but which I think was the kind of back to the question of this board is hearing 2 days before, did every other board hear 2 days before? And of course you can't pull that together. And at the end of the day, it sounds like $90 million invested in this thing. We got $1 million offer on the table. It's kind of a no lose. Is the likelihood that they're gonna say, yeah, take it, or is the likelihood like someone else is gonna have to? I assume they don't have to, whoever is in receivership of this thing doesn't have to take anything.
Yes, they do.
They do.
They do. They either have to take a better bid or our bid.
Okay.
So there are several people who have put in the notice to move forward in this bidding process. I have every reason to believe that somebody else might take it. However, they might not. I can't control that right now.
But they have to close by June 30th.
But they have to close by June 30th. which means they have to have the cash in hand, so we don't end up with another TTE
Exactly.
mess.
So
Has
does
to
the
close.
MRC have to take the highest bid, or do they have some discretion taking the best?
So
operator
MRC doesn't take any of the bids.
with the receipt?
The receiver does. As part of the MRC's bid, we put in all sorts of caveats around, it has to be used for this purpose. There have to be an operator that has experience doing this type of process, not this exact process, but something reasonably similar. We put in all of the caveats that we hope will lead to a qualified bidder taking this on.
But we put that bid in.
MRC.
I mean, we as MRC, but if someone else puts a higher bid in, those caveats don't apply.
They do. That's the piece. This is the deal. Are you gonna outbid me for this deal? They accepted the deal. Are we now, is somebody else gonna come in on these terms and outbid?
The exact same terms.
On the exact
So
same
they have
terms.
accepted this bid.
The receiver accepted, this is what a stalking horse bid kicks off a bid process. Now what they're saying is we have to, before we can accept MRC's bid, we have to give these terms to the market and see if the market will give us better returns.
Because that we don't get it. I don't think that our requirements would apply to someone that wants to come in and say, what are you talking about for this thing? We'll do what we want with it.
So
They cannot do that.
they cannot do that. And if they tried to do that, MRC would not consent to the sign, to the contracts, which make it a useless endeavor. So MRC has the trash, which makes the plant run.
Trash balance.
Does it run now? Because I thought that they weren't even.
They're
not
not,
running now.
they are not open right now, but it's operational.
Has it been open for any significant amount of
Yeah.
time since it started?
Yeah, it was open for a year and a half, 2 years.
Maybe a year and a half.
And it was doing better than what we had projected.
They ran out of money, and the mismanagement of fiber right and coastal resources was what happened, why it shut down. But it still put us it still put our municipalities in kind of a compromised position. I mean, I can say this as a counselor, so it's in a different place, but I feel that we, instead of what we had agreed to is, with the biofuel products and making product and stuff, we have been landfilling for the most part. So our municipal solid waste has been either in at Juniper Ridge or Norwich Walk. But PERC has kind of stepped in the interim.
I was gonna say, for the last many, many months, we've been paying another
Right,
charge
with
for
PERC, right, with PERC, but at the very beginning, when it took it was a 9-month opening or delayed opening, or even longer than that, I think. They opened for a while, they shut down because they got a canister in the thing and they exploded and they shut down, and then so our waste has been bypassed. It's just been a really long process.
journey.
And have those
Trash.
fixing starts ended up costing us more to get rid of all of our waste?
That's
We're
where
paying-
Sophie can come
We
in. I don't
are
think so,
paying
yeah.
the exact same tip fee that we agreed to when we signed the contract. So
That
it
we
was,
agreed to with this facility over here, or it's now what it's going to.
Yeah.
Okay. They're honoring what we've got to pay over here.
so PERC charges us more than what we tip, and MRC has worked that through. So that
Paying
we
the
don't
difference.
pay it. Yeah, we don't pay it.
But we do pay because we are.
Not really, because
It's complicated.
there's trash going from the southern communities are going to Norwich Walk at a lesser rate, so it balances out. And to the timing of this, I think everybody was kind of waiting for Bangor, because a membership meeting without Bangor doesn't really exist.
Exactly. My concern is just making sure that our trash is not being landfilled.
Mhm.
I'm concerned about that. That's a big concern for me.
It sounds as though this is right, if we were to get it, is that, but we're probably not going to do
I am saying that it's this, Leo. I don't know. I do know that we have several qualified people, bidders who have been qualified that are going to submit bids as far as we know. We have not been able to talk to anybody about any kind of public-private partnership. And we're not able to do that until there's an actual sale. If it doesn't come to us. We pay for it, so.
MRC is prepared, if it does come, they're prepared to, just thinking.
With the June 30th closing date.
All right. So Sophie's gonna get chocolate and I'm gonna reel this in. So we are comfortable saying at this time that we are not requesting
A member.
a member meeting of the MRC.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Moving on to finance and operations.
That was all.
Tom?
Okay, moving right along in a long meeting. First item under finance and operation is determining whether to move forward with the process of amending the town personnel ordinances to observe Juneteenth as a town holiday. And Sophie, in the information on our agenda, identified the options we had from moving forward to not doing anything to finding some other alternative. So Sophie, you speaking to this item?
So this is a topic of hot debate in municipal circles. There are some towns that there's no debate at all because their personnel policies or their ordinance simply refer to what the state holidays are. We don't do that. We are individual here. We do what is best for Orono. So I will admit, I'm getting some questions from staffers and unions and as to what the town plans to do with Juneteenth. And I thought it would make more sense to have that conversation now as opposed to on June 14th. What I have told you is what holidays, so what we're talking about is a town holiday. So we're really talking about with regard to our employees and whether or not we close non-emergency services. And if we close non-emergency services, that usually means additional payroll expense for our emergency services because they can't not respond. So with our current payroll expense, a holiday costs the town about $10,000. Given where we are and other things, that's only as payroll goes up, that expense will go up. So don't hold me to that in perpetuity. The main town and city managers had an informal survey back in January. There were 51 communities that responded. Orono was not one that responded because I knew we weren't doing anything at that point. 31 had adopted the holiday, 9 were considering adopting it, 9 weren't considering, 9 had considered and weren't adopting, and 2 had decisions pending. And again, of that 31, there were, I wouldn't say like a majority, but there were a number that tied it to language that they already had in place. So it really wasn't a decision. So what I've said is you of course can do nothing, which means we wouldn't observe the holiday. You can simply refer a revision of the personnel ordinance that would be as technical as simply adding Juneteenth as the holiday in the ordinance. That would move forward to May for public hearing and adoption for it to become effective this year, or any schedule if you don't care about it being effective this year. Or you can come up with a different idea if you want to do something different and give me some direction and ask me to come back with something else. That's all I have.
So I got a little feisty the last time we talked about holidays, mostly around why we observe some and not others. Which my feelings on that have not necessarily changed. However, for this particular holiday, when I think about, so I mean, I've done a lot of reading about, let me back this up. The most important question for me when I was considering this holiday, which is primarily a holiday that is meant to acknowledge systemic inequities that Black people face, like continue to faced and continue to face in America, is what is the conversation happening in Black communities around this issue? And in all of the reading I did, there was quite a loud sort of collective voice forming of activists and writers saying, like, this is performative. This is, now, granted, we also just discussed having a Juneteenth proclamation. Both of these things are symbolic gestures. Both of these things need to be accompanied with actual action. But when I'm, like a writer, I admire Frederick Joseph, who wrote The Black Friend on being a better white person. His a quote from him about Juneteenth becoming a federal holiday. Juneteenth becoming a federal holiday does more for white people than it does for any Black person, as is often the case with performative things that this country tries to tout as social justice. So, and this is just probably the most concise, but not by any stretch of the imagination, a minority opinion in all of the reading that I've done and the voices that I've listened to on the subject. So while both of these things, the proclamation and recognizing the holiday, are symbolic gestures that need to be accompanied by action, when I think about offering this as a holiday, like when I think about the proclamation, that's also in our historic record. 200 years from now, people will look at the town record and see that we adopted this Juneteenth proclamation every year, and that will say something about us as a community and our place in history and how we chose to respond to the times. When it comes to observing the holiday and knowing that that will take a minimum of $10,000 of taxpayer money, and I think about the fact that it's a symbolic gesture, and I think about, like, we have a lot of needs around our DEI work that we are not currently funding. We're having a hue and cry from the community wanting more around our DEI work, but the community is also saying, please don't raise my taxes either. If we were going to spend $10,000 on something connected to this issue, I would want it to be in advancing our DEI work, not in a symbolic gesture that might make white people feel better about themselves, to be completely blunt. So while I still have some opinions about why we choose to recognize some holidays and not others, I don't feel like adding this as a holiday, particularly with the price tag that comes to the taxpayer, is a good use of our very, very limited funds when we have a lot of needs around DEI work that are more meaningful than simply a day off.
Our
Other comments?
post offices and federal buildings and closed on Juneteenth.
Federal buildings, federal agencies, state buildings, state agencies are
Post
closed.
office,
Yeah,
no mail.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
But like banks and stuff like that, that's all private.
right, they can decide.
But it's nice to know, like, what the societal.
But this year it's on a Sunday, so question mark.
So I had a question, Sophie, because it is on a Sunday, and the state standard is if a holiday falls on a Saturday, the previous Friday is the day off. If it's on a Sunday, the following
That's,
Monday.
that's the town standards.
And this year, we have done a number of unprecedented things in regard to providing bonuses for work through COVID.
So I just want to clarify. This is not staff asking for it off. This is staff trying to plan.
I understand. Okay, so I guess my question is, given that we hope to have more input from some formation of a JEDI group or DEI committee later on, who might tell us that this is a worthwhile project to engage in or not a worthwhile project to engage in. Could our policy this year be to reward those people who are already scheduled to work on that Sunday with a bonus for working on a state and federal holiday, but not to extend that into a formal holiday observance on the following Monday? So if you're working for the fire department and that happens to be your shift, it's lucky you, but
So I hear what you are saying, 100%. I have learned the hard way, you can't just give labor unions anything. And I would argue that the labor unions probably would not like the idea that certain of their members get a holiday and others don't. I think, Jeff, that I brought this item up because council is very committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And there are some people in this community who have taken my concerns about the community voice, especially related to the police department, as me not supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion. And my concerns related to how we weave a committee into our current structure as me not supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion. This item is here, not because I am recommending this, but because if I didn't put it here, then the argument could be made that staff does not support it. So that's why this is here. And I'm sure labor unions would come to the table to negotiate something. It would be costly and it would separate and create a stratification within staff that I have worked so hard to try to bridge. Is that a question?
I would say that I have no solution, but my concern is that we're trading a cost on one group which is underrepresented, which is people with socioeconomic status in our community, who are going to bear the undue burden of a regressive tax like this for feeling good about it. I'm very concerned about the tax burden on people who are least able to bear it, some of whom are among the group that we're trying to celebrate.
I appreciate the budget concerns around this. As far as the question of performativity is concerned, it feels almost more performative to have a proclamation without something more substantive backing it. Not that a proclamation isn't worthwhile or completely substantial or anything. I really appreciate the work you did. And I'm not privy to a lot of the conversations that have taken place around sort of what we value for a holiday, what we think of as holidays worth celebrating, what we don't. But as far as holidays worth celebrating and worth giving a holiday treatment or something, I think Juneteenth ought to be fairly high up there. That's all I'm going to say.
Is there a way to, if it falls on, if we say that this is something that we're going to honor, is there, when it falls on a Sunday, falls on a Sunday, and there's no closure, no office closure, no building closure, no,
Maybe
right?
do
It's
that
closed
about-
anyway.
Let's do that about holidays.
So
Well, I was like, do you want to have another conversation about exchanging this for a holiday? Because that happened.
Then there was that
Because-
conversation.
But I know that that's not a non-starter, so I didn't even bring it up. But like,
That was
to your point about what holidays are valued, I have a lot of bones to pick with what holidays we value for a lot of different reasons in a lot of different ways. But that's definitely a conversation that would go very far in terms of like, can we exchange this for another holiday?
have a problem. I do have a problem with just the addition of a holiday. I think it's an expense that we can't afford. Look just roughly at the budget that's coming. And we say 10,000, but I mean, there has to be a productivity cost to this. But then, I mean, as an employer, days off cost me a lot of money. So it's different, I'm sure, per account, but there is additional, I mean, I think the 10,000 is the floor. And I didn't know that already been conversation, because my thought was also us telling the town workers, you know, here's what you have. I was going to legitimately suggest, which already would fall flat, it's like, well, if they want to decide of these 12, we want this one, that seems like a
So,
workable solution to me, but it sounds like it's not, because it's already been discussed.
so what,
I'm not going to blind you up.
what my, attorney- without going
Get
there,
me started.
the idea of turning, so I first approached my senior management team with, well, HR practice says the best way to deal with this is to move to floating holidays. So we could take and create some floaters, right? Which it's a different discussion for a different day. But what immediately came up is whenever you try to do something like that, that is perceived as taking something away, even if it's not, even if it's reallocating the same. And ultimately, the question kind of becomes, you know, this is a council choice. And the one thing I'm hearing right now is that maybe council isn't ready to make a decision on this for this year. And so one option that you would have is to say, this isn't a closed, we haven't made a decision on this. It's still an open discussion item. There are different areas that we can look at. Why don't we kick the can down the road and allow for more discussion, especially after the contracts are closed?
I think that summarizes my view on this, Sophie. I think that Megan in her comments early on made a very good point about this is not the year to do that, to spend that extra money and to make it a holiday. Let's wait until we're further down the road with when we impanel a Jedi committee. Let's hear some more information. Let's see what some other more communities are doing, and let's revisit it another time.
Sounds reasonable to me, especially hopefully with the addition of input from a Jedi committee for next year. I think that sounds very reasonable.
So write down kick the can.
I use that with the budget all the time, guys.
We will make a better informed decision when we have more information at our disposal.
So have we reached a consensus on this issue that we are not doing anything about this holiday for this year?
Yes.
Can we just note that this is one of the things that we hope to discuss with our Jedi
Yes.
panel, however that becomes forward?
So
Yep.
since you said, can you just note,
I will-
Nancy will pull that out of the minutes for us.
Okay.
That's what
Thanks, Nancy.
say, I would, sorry, I don't know how to phrase this. But I don't want to put us to doing nothing on Juneteenth. I mean, we have the proclamation. I don't know what we do that doesn't require some kind of fiscal note, but as far as this is concerned, I mean, I agree. I think doing nothing can't make sense. I guess I'm just trying to wrap my head around what, I guess, like town communication can just happen around this, which isn't really the purview of the council. I get that.
So we don't normally celebrate through town messages, holidays.
Okay.
That's, if we want to dedicate more resources, then I think we could think about that, but that's, if you want to give me some direction, then I can do it, but just as a normal,
Something on the side.
yeah, that,
I mean, that's pretty simple.
just something, something simple like that,
Yeah.
but not like,
But that's really what I'm talking about. I mean, I have no concrete like
Gotcha.
master plan or anything.
Maybe something at the library.
Always
Library will
something
probably
with
do
the
something.
library.
Yeah.
Always,
I
yeah.
mean, Orono Pride is putting on an event on that day, but it's not a Juneteenth event. But it's helpful.
We ready to move on? Then let's do that, and we move on to the next item, which is pre-budget discussion related to the expected service level for FY 2023. Probably not a great topic for 7:20 at the end of a meeting.
So I guess my question is, last year, we kind of dealt with this, Tom, as a survey that I
Mhm.
did around budget documents, more, less, the same in terms of services, put boxes for people to put their thoughts in. Are you all right with me doing it that way again this year?
I think that'd be a great idea. A good opportunity for everyone to provide some input. And then you noted that input when you put the budget together, that some counselors said such and such.
Yes, I did. Make sure that we hit the places that there was a need for discussion.
Yep.
Okay.
Wow.
That was easy.
You okay with that?
Yes.
Can I ask a question on that? Maybe I-
Of course.
I understand totally what this was asking, but specific information we're seeking is one of the comments. And the document that I've looked at the last several, and there's a format.
Mhm.
One that I looked at here is different. It's got a different summary in the beginning. It doesn't have all those tables. So are you saying we're not going to do that? Okay, we're not gonna pull it up. But like, you know, so we're gonna, when you say what we want, what we're seeking, we would get the same information, those same tables from a budget.
Like the spreadsheets.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's on PDF. but
Yes.
it's-
Yeah.
Okay, all right. And another quick question. OMR stands for,
Outcomes, methods, resources. So what the goals are, how we meet those goals, and what resources council has given us to meet those goals. They're narratives.
could a summary be put at the beginning of that document that shows kind of major changes, or are those major changes in that
They're
document?
noted in the discussion on that document.
Truly full of the time. 34 pages to try to track that.
Well, it's 4 pages per section. I'll see what I can do for it. Every time, Tom, somebody comes on, the document gets bigger.
An
I'm trying to
elevator.
summarize.
Could you make it into an elevator statement?
Yes. Are you ready for the town manager's report?
We are ready for the town manager report.
So I have good news. We actually received a preliminary award from Penobscot Emergency Management Agency for the Hazmat Monitoring Grant. They are going to give us $66,125.41 for that. If you recall, that's about a $85,000-$90,000 piece of equipment, and we're gonna make the match from Hazmat Reserve, so that works. Also received good news today that Maine Department of Environmental Protection has accepted the Water Pollution Control Facilities Climate Adaptation Plan. And I worked with the engineer today to get the final drawdown request of those $20,000 of grant funds. So that is a project that is wrapped up. And too bad Sonia left, but I would encourage folks to take a look at that plan if you haven't already, because it does tell us that WPCF is very susceptible to the rise in sea level. That is actually the thing that is gonna cause the most problem for us down there. I also want to make you aware that we have several organizations that we're working with that use our space. So, for example, the Health Association uses space for the thrift shop. The Historical Society uses some of our space. The Land Trust uses some of our space. Penobscot Valley Ski Club uses part of the ballistics building, which is ours, and also provides service for the trails to do the winter grooming. Our insurance company is pushing us to actually get formal rental agreements. Really? with folks that are using our space. And also I'm working with, Mitch and I are working with the Penobscot Valley Ski Club right now on a memorandum of understanding, which would come to the council, but to kind of lay out our respective roles. And I think one of the things that's tough is you want to balance really excited, engaged community members that want to do wonderful things for the community against the fact that, for example, our trails are open to the public and serve multiple uses. Like in certain areas of town, those trails are interwoven with habitat protection and other things. So just trying to underlie so that the protections we have in place here can support work in a directed kind of way so that we all are meeting the goals that we want to meet. And last but not least, this is one of these, I'd like nods of the head if you're all right with me doing this and putting it on the consent agenda for April, and if you're not, then we will do it. But I received a request from the fire department to submit a grant to Firehouse Subs in the amount of $35,000 approximately, with or without a match from Hazmat Fund. They're still trying to figure out if a $10,000 match would make it a stronger application. And it's for the Jaws of Life, the extrication equipment. The deadline on this grant, just found out about it, it's due on the 7th. So I would like to submit, we have, after we pull money out from the, for the monitoring equipment, we'll have about $150,000 in the hazmat reserve. So
Great.
if you're all right with me, yes, applying for that, I'd love to do that.
I can't imagine that we're not all right with that. Anybody object? Having observed the use of the Jaws of Life in a serious accident in front of my house, we have to have the best equipment. We should have anyway.
So we have a set that the union actually bought for the town in 1994. The town accepted it with the agreement that we would maintain it and take care of it. But it is most definitely at the end of its useful life. The other issue is the one we have right now, it clips to, like it has lines that come out of it that hook to the truck to run it. Whereas this one, as I'm told, will be battery operated and will be able to use it in different situations.
Good.
Now, I know enough to be dangerous. About that. Thing.
You all set, Sophie? Is that it?
I am more than all
right.
set.
Then a motion to adjourn unless anybody else has anything. All right. Let's have a motion.
Approval. Second.
All right. Moved and seconded. Just wave your hands so I can see them. Okay, we are adjourned and thank you all very much.
Thanks.